What's up, everybody? I'm Jason Sellers. Welcome back to the Jason Sellers Political Podcast. Just stepping in real quick to tell you a new episode here, and in a few seconds we'll be joined by Elliott Payne, candidate for City Council in Ward 1 in Minneapolis. And this is a Zoom. This is not being live streamed, just because, with a guest, I want to make sure we can hear them everything clearly, which we can't really do on the live stream. So I'm about to admit him into the wait. If he's in the waiting room, so I'm about to admit him. Follow on socials at Vote Sellers and do the poll that I put out. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi.
There you are.
All right. So to switch microphones there.
There we go.
So, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Me too. I emailed about 6 candidates across different city levels, and 2 of them responded, so thanks for taking the time to do this. Just starting off with a quick introduction. I'm Jason Sellers. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm 18. I am I'm a resident of Ward 1, and I'm into politics, especially local.
Yeah, and I'm Elliott Payne. I'm the DFL endorsed candidate for City Council here in Ward 1, where Jason resides. And I'm happy to be here. My pronouns are he, him.
All right, so I just got a few questions here, and shouldn't take long. All right. So first off, just tell us about your work in City Hall and the innovation team. I've heard you discuss it in other media, but I'm still just kind of confused about what you did.
Yeah, so I work in the Office of Performance and Innovation. My particular role is I'm actually a consultant. I'm an outside contractor, bringing in some skill sets around human-centered design thinking, and some process improvement background as well. And so our portfolio of work has spanned working with small businesses and launching the small business portal. We've worked around renters protections and amending the ordinance on conduct on licensed premises. And the most recent work that we've been on is the Safety for All budget around launching the mental health response. Those are kind of the top line issues, but our team is made up of data analysts and policymakers, and we like to work collaboratively with stakeholders across City Hall, but also with community, so that any policy we bring forward has the community centered in it. And so we do a lot of process around how do we bring community voice into policymaking.
Yeah, I've noticed the big theme of your campaign is, community and making sure everyone, gets their ideas heard. I think it was either your launch party or one of the first things you did. And we split up into teams and talked about different categories. And that was, the first time I had been in something like that. So next up, personally, I've seen via tweets and newsletters from mayoral candidates that they've talked to a lot of people that don't know there's an election coming up. So what can you do, or what have you done to raise that awareness and raise voter turnout? And has that strategy changed as we get closer and closer to election day?
Yeah, so obviously one of the most efficient ways to reach people is through platforms like Twitter and Facebook, but I think what's really critical is reaching people one-on-one. And so we've knocked literally thousands of doors in the ward, and we've gone and we've knocked those doors more than once. And I think that's one of the key things, especially given this election. There's been so much confusion about the ballot measures and what's the path that we're on. And there's been a lot of mailers out there that I think they're disingenuous in a lot of ways in the way that they're talking about some of the most, important issues that the city is facing around public safety, around housing. And I think one of the most effective ways to break through that is those one-on-one connections when you're out knocking doors. And then also, this is my first campaign as, somebody running for elected office. And I launched it in the middle of, a COVID spike last winter. And so, knocking doors was something, and actually one of the first campaigns that I worked on was the 2020 election through our local SD Senate district party. And we were doing a lot of back and forth of what's the best way to engage people and stay safe. And, we were leaning really heavily in the 2020 election on text messaging as a means of making that one-on-one connection. But, you know, through 2020, we kind of had to learn more about what was safe, especially being outdoors and masked. And so it very early started off mostly as phone calls. And then as spring came upon us, we did a lot of door knocking going into the endorsement. And then it's kind of making sure that we are both phone calling, door knocking, and having a really prominent presence on social media, I think is the best way to answer that.
Yeah, I know that. I saw you that one time driving down 29th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah, I can attest that y'all have been hard at work. So a big goal of your campaign has been transportation. You've mentioned Lowry Avenue, and I
Mm-hmm.
bring that up because that's a road I drive across pretty much every day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and right now, especially with Johnson Street closed, it's kind of dangerous to cross that street.
Yeah.
So what would you do and what can you do to make roads like that safer for pedestrians and drivers on cross streets? But at the same time, what can you do? Because are the roads managed by the county, and what power does the city have?
Yeah, so that is a county road, and there is actually a work group right now that includes county and neighborhood associations, and there's a seat for the city there too. And I think that uh, both being an advocate for pedestrians as an elected official at the city level, but also being an advocate for pedestrians as an elected official who's in close coordination with our county commissioner is going to be one of the best ways to make sure that that's a safer road. And there are some design proposals out there around, I think one of the problems is it being a 4-lane road. It's just really hard to, and I'm a full-time biker as well.
Hmm.
And even just biking across the road, you'll have somebody who's turning left and you can't see that second lane. And so there's some pretty standard road designs out there around having the shared turn lane in the center and creating it as a more two lane back and forth with a shared turn lane. Those types of design adjustments can help. I think it needs to be slowed down. People just drive way too fast. And B, when it's a 4-lane road with 2 lanes in either direction, it just creates all these opportunities for accidents. And we see a lot of accidents on Lowry, especially at Lowry and Central and Lowry and University.
Yeah, I'll just say Lowry and University is the hardest left turn I've ever had to do. It takes, 3 cycles of a stoplight to get up there.
Right.
Um, One thing I just wanted to mention is I think Minneapolis has always been, at least recently, top of the nation in bike lanes and number of bicyclists we have. So, is there anything we're not doing well in terms of bicyclists?
I think that what we should be moving to is infrastructure that separates bikers from cars. And actually, one of the things that was interesting for me as like again a full-time bike commuter in particular, I was at a conference in Portland, and that's historically been one of the top bike cities in the country.
Hmm.
And what was really interesting that I had noticed as a distinction between Portland and Minneapolis is they don't actually have very good infrastructure, like at all. It's a lot of sharrows, the green painted lines, but just without any actual, separated infrastructure or separated facilities for bikers. And I think that, I've been commuting full time for over a decade now, so I'm pretty confident on the road. But I think one of the things that we need to move to is making it a safe form of transportation for riders of every skill level. And I think the best way to do that is that physical separation between biker and car user. And I think that that's one of the big areas of opportunity for us. And we're seeing it pop up here and there. I really like the infrastructure on Plymouth Avenue over on the north side, where there's a little curb that separates you. It's not just the bollards that are separating you, that gives you the visual separation, the actual physical curb. I think it just instills confidence in a much broader set of users that it'd be one of those incentives that would increase bike usage.
Um, I know I've biked a little bit on the St. Anthony Parkway Trail, and is there anything like that where you can do it on the sidewalk that would be possible?
There's been a lot of this newer infrastructure right now where it is putting the bike lane kind of elevated at the sidewalk level. And I'm actually kind of curious to see what the data says on that, because the long time guidance for bikers is to ride in the road, don't ride in the sidewalk. And partly that's because cars won't see you as they're turning right or as they're coming out of driveways. And so we actually have the new bike route on 18th Avenue over here in Northeast, and it actually cuts across people's driveways on certain parts of the residential segment. And I think that, again, it is achieving that goal of some physical separation from cars, but I'm curious to see how that pans out over the long term, in terms of it puts you essentially in the same visual place as a sidewalk. And I myself, when I've biked down there, I've had cars kind of almost turn into me. Nothing happened as of yet, but it is one of those things where cars are maybe not exactly seeing you. So I think that we are still in the process of figuring out what that safest version of infrastructure is. And in every case, it's really dependent on which road it's on, how much access we have. But I think the goal should be that separation in every instance.
Yeah, one thing I'm just curious about is everyone knows it's a good idea, wearing reflectors and stuff like that, but are there any, regulations that you have to? Because I know there's an intersection I cross a lot where my grandpa owns a small business on St. Anthony Parkway, and so I cross, I think it's St. Anthony Parkway and 5th, and there's been times I see bikers at the last second, I'm like, oh, I gotta stop.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it is really good practice to have reflective gear on and lights on and helmets. Um, the regulatory framework around that, I think it would be hard to enforce.
Hmm.
And I think just on principle, what we should be striving for is avoiding those biker car interactions as much as possible, more so than necessarily making it a requirement as a bike user to increase your visibility. I think you should increase your visibility as just like a best practice, but I think it's that physical separation that prevents that interaction in the first place that's going to keep folks, A, the most safe, and that should be our goal, but B, make them more confident about using that form of transportation over others.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. Again, I think it's St. Anthony Parkway. There's a turn left. That sometimes a lot of times I go on it. There's a biker coming, and I'm thinking, I guess if whoever gets there first is gonna have to, whoever doesn't get there first is gonna have to stop, and it's kind of awkward to turn left because that bike trail kind of cuts into the street a little bit. Um, so right now the talk of the town is policing, question two, and all that. What does the
Mm-hmm.
ideal Department of Public Safety look like? So, like, what's a good number of mental health response workers? What's the criteria of requiring an armed police officer? And how do we make sure all our neighborhoods in the city get equal and quality responses?
Yeah. So when we made our recommendations around the mental health team, what was really critical in that process was having access to data. And this is actually one of the things that inspired me to run. As we were working at the staff level of implementing, we were having extraordinary difficulties getting different departments to share their data with us. And so one of the big kind of functional benefits of having a Department of Public Safety would be to break down those silos between departments so that people would be, more comfortable sharing data because it'll all be within the same department. And what we did with that data is we looked at what's the peak call time, what's the volume and frequency of these types of calls, and how many staff would we need to have to be able to, and what's the geographic distribution of those type of calls. And we made a determination based on the data that we would need at least 2 teams to have 24/7 coverage so that we could have them staged at various parts of the city so that their response times would be adequate to meet the need. And so I think that the answer of what's the right staff number is really going to be driven by the data. And we should be, one of the opportunities that we have right now is actually refining, they're called the EDP codes, I'm sorry, the PNC codes, the problem nature code. That's what determines what type of dispatch service we should be using. So EDP is the mental health call. That's an emotionally disturbed person. And one of the things that I learned through this campaign process and, talking with stakeholders is, I was talking to a police officer, and he was saying back in the 90s, they didn't even make a distinction between a mental health call and just a general disturbance. Mm-hmm. And so, they have right now kind of the crisis intervention training that's about a 40-hour training for police officers. It used to be that only a small handful of officers had that training. And, that was the big innovation at that time, is creating an EDP problem nature code and then having officers trained to respond to that. And so that in principle is what a Department of Public Safety will look like. We'll have the types of codes so that we can identify, is this, a super high priority, urgent, we need to get the SWAT team there immediately because there's an active shooter involved? Or is this a wellness check? And we need to have this ability to make that kind of granular determination at the moment of triage when you call 911. Because as a citizen of Minneapolis, you shouldn't be the expert on the resource you need. You should be able to just call 911 and say, hey, this is what's going on. Mm-hmm. And we as a city should be the expert in what the right dispatched resource ought to be. And so the right public safety, to me, is one in which we do this historical analysis of the types of calls that we get. And then we determine, okay, how many mental health staffers do we need to have? How many social workers and violence interrupters do we need to have? How many substance use experts do we need to have? Have that driven by the data, and there should be this representative amount of people so that we can reduce call times and have the right resource at the right time. And one of the things that's also really important about the Department of Public Safety is we need to have the protocols of, well, you might actually need an armed officer as a backup. And we can't have this oppositional department not willing to play nicely with these other resources as it exists under the current structure. They need to be peers with all of these other capabilities so that we can just, in a very, calculated way, make a determination in real time. This is a non-urgent issue. Let's dispatch a wellness check social worker versus there is a risk of volatility. Let's do a co-response. And that should be completely seamless and non-political.
Yeah. I can relate to it a little bit. When I was younger, me and my 4 older brothers were living with my mom, who had substance abuse and bipolar, and she would, start being hostile, I guess, and either my grandparent or somebody else would call and a police officer would show up, and she would always just talk her way out of it, and not much got done for a while. So at least on a personal level, I can kind of see that, stuff like that happens. And yeah. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves because, the election still needs to be held. But so if you win, are you going to be able to keep the same level of community and inclusion of other people's ideas in that little time between election day and taking office in January? So, I know campaigns are very busy, but have you already had to start planning what you're doing in that transitional period?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. And actually, I've been thinking about it more expansively than just in those 2 months. This is a really unique election in that redistricting is happening. Mm-hmm. And so it's only a 2-year term. And I think that one of the patterns, as a person prior to running for office myself, one of the patterns I had observed in our elected officials is, deep community engagement. Door knocking is a very intensive exercise, and it can wear you down a little bit because it's day after day, every day, and you see me out there in the neighborhood just walking around, going to the next set of doors that I'm knocking. There's a long pattern of elected officials doing that deep community engagement during an election year, and then kind of backing off once they've won. And it's obviously a different responsibility to be an elected official compared to a candidate. But one of the things I'm actually looking forward to is creating a system of continuous engagement with the community that is more oriented towards governing and policy making and less oriented towards campaigning and winning an election. Because frankly, as a 2 year, term, I don't think we can afford to have that kind of backing off of community engagement. Uh, I think there needs to be a sustainability to it. And as the candidate, I think the level of effort that it takes to do this is maybe not long-term sustainable, but I would like to develop a model of engagement that has that long-term sustainability that keeps you really connected with the community. And really, I think your policies are better when you're that connected to the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know one thing a lot of people who support the your opponent, the incumbent, say, he supports this, and the key word there is quietly, and I haven't seen a lot of as much community engagement, especially in the campaign,
Mm-hmm.
as your campaign.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much all I had. Thanks for coming, and we got to all the questions I wrote down. So, unless you have any additional comments on what you've said or have any questions for me, I think that's about it.
What do you aspire to for your political future?
Um, I think it depends on who wins these elections. I'd love to run for mayor, but if the people I support win, then I don't really find the need to, and we'll see in a couple years how they work out. But I think I'm gonna study political science, and I think just if I can become a campaign manager or work in City Hall on a committee or something, I think those would be fine uh, occupations as well.
That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's been really great about this process is the recognition of that there's a lot of ways to get involved. Anything from picking up one door knocking shift all the way through to being, you know, somebody who's helping to run a campaign. And I think there's a lot of different places in between that's like more and less effort. And so, I mean, the simple fact that you're hosting this podcast is really above and beyond when it comes to civic engagement. So I just really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, I think the 2020 election is really when I wanted people to vote. Even getting 5 people to vote, and say 4 of them voted for Biden and one of them didn't. I just wanted people to. The more people vote, the more voices get heard, and whether they're on my side or not is, I think, it doesn't matter as long as more voices. I think the more people to vote, the more representation we get, and
Totally.
yeah, I think 2020 elections when I really started to become active, and 2018 is the midterms is when I really started to follow it. So yeah, that's all I have.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.
Yep, you too.
Yep.
All right, so that was Elliott Payne, City Council candidate for Ward 1. Hopefully you could hear him okay. The audio test didn't go as planned before, but I think I fixed it. So you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at VoteSellers. Follow me on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, Jason Sellers Politics, and on Twitch, VoteSellers. I think I'll still be, depending on the quality of this podcast, so this podcast is a lot higher quality than the past two, I will be doing the podcast just off the live stream, because I think doing the live stream also impedes the quality of the recording as well, because I do them separately, but they seem to be connected a little bit. So we'll see if I do live streams in the future. So this podcast should be out. Today is Friday. It should be out later today. It's the 22nd of October. And then tomorrow I'll be interviewing Billy Menz, who I actually know. I've talked about that. I'll be interviewing Billy Menz tomorrow afternoon. So hopefully that one should be out tomorrow. So I think we should have back-to-back podcasts. And yeah, Billy Menz is a Parks District 1 candidate. Oh, that's a notification. Don't want to look at that. Forgot I had notifications on. I don't get many notifications on the computer. All right. So, thanks for watching or listening. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at VoteSellers. Follow me on YouTube, Jason Sellers Politics. Follow me on Twitch, VoteSellers. I do have a poll about this election. You can find it on my Twitter or Facebook. It might be my pinned tweet. If it's not, I will make it my pinned tweet. So yeah, thanks for listening and watching. Bye.